Going to talk about his career and talk about what he's been doing for Anderson.
All right, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you, Joe, for inviting me back to talk about what I've been up to since I left the department. My career since leaving has been predominantly within social research and within research and teaching within academia. So that's the kind of the area that I'm going to be focusing upon particularly. But what will hopefully become clear is that there will be crossover between what I'm saying and my experiences and what everybody else is saying about their experiences of the job sector and the labour market following graduation. So I'll start off by just sort of plotting my career journey so far, really, to sort of give you that context before I start talking in more detail about some of the things that I've done and some of the other things that Joe asked us to sort of think about as part of these presentations. So as Joe said, I did an MA here in sociological research. I did it part-time, so it took me 2 years to do it. I did my undergraduate degree in sociology and criminology at the University of Liverpool. And while I was here, I was also working part-time. I worked as a youth worker at Rotherham College of Arts and Technology, and like Rebecca, I also did some volunteering with young offenders at Rotherham Youth Offending Service as well, which was very significant for me in terms of where I went to afterwards and was very helpful for my career, which I'll talk about in a moment. So, after leaving the department, I moved to London and I lived there for 3 years and worked there for 3 years. And I worked for an organisation called the National Children's Bureau, which is a children's charity, national children's charity. And I worked in their research department as a research assistant. And the organisation has a kind of a broad sort of remit in terms of trying to improve policy and practice in the area of vulnerable children and vulnerable families in particular. It's a more kind of lobbying, right? It doesn't deliver frontline services, it's more a kind of a support structure for organisations that are involved in and have that kind of strategic remit in terms of actually delivering services, and also in terms of like lobbying government around these particular issues as well. So I was in that position for 2 years, and I was then promoted within the department to research officer. So I was given greater responsibility, and generally as a kind of a researcher within the evaluation and evidence and research department within the organisation, I was responsible as an assistant for sort of like I do sort of like more kind of low level sort of research tasks, some administrative type stuff, but I was also doing interviews and involved in survey design and analysis. As an officer, as you might imagine, my responsibilities, I took on more responsibilities. I started to become involved in sort of managing projects. I took the lead on actually doing research, sort of organising and designing data tools, etc., designing evaluations, liaising with funders, managing all of that sort of stuff. So that's kind of what I was doing for those 3 years in that particular role. And I got a lot of other opportunities alongside that as well, some really exciting stuff. I contributed to several government consultations because of the work that I was involved in. So I was actually involved in actually shaping and influencing policy. I wrote a briefing document which went to the government, who were asking for contributions on their strategy for reducing violence against women. So, you know, I've contributed to those kinds of things. I also did some work with the media. I wrote a press release which appeared on the BBC website, which was quite nice. I also did some work with The Guardian as well, which I can talk a little bit more about if anybody has any questions on that. So I did that for 3 years, and there were 2 reasons that I kind of wanted to get out of it. First, I did enjoy all the work that I was doing, but I was doing research on something that I wasn't really passionate about. I wanted to shape my own research agenda, and also, being a northern lad from Rotherham, I didn't really like living down London too much, so I was quite keen to come back. And the route for me, what I wanted to do was a PhD. I wanted to come back because I wanted to sort of develop my own research agenda, and I wanted to do research on things that I was passionate about. And I also enjoyed teaching as well. In my job as a youth worker, while I was doing my MA, I did a bit of teaching at the college, and I really enjoyed it. I taught sociology a few times, so I wanted to kind of get into that. So I came back to Sheffield and I did my PhD in the law school in the Centre for Criminological Research, and I won a White Rose scholarship to do that. And my PhD, just very, very briefly, was very different from what I'd done at National Children's Bureau. I did an ethnography of men involved in violence, and some of those men were also involved in what you might call professional crime, drug dealing, protection, debt collecting, quite serious criminals, some of them. And so these were people who, I did the research in their communities, hung about in nightclubs, pubs, went to football matches, hung about on the streets with them, went to their houses, these kinds of things. These are places and spaces that I did the work, did life history interviews with them, observed them doing things that they shouldn't have been doing, that were a bit naughty, that sort of thing. So that's kind of what my PhD was, and I had my viva in December 2013. I passed with no corrections, and I'm now sort of in post-PhD situation at the moment. And people ask me what I do at the moment, and the best way to describe what I do at the moment is I'm a bit of an odd jobs man, really. I don't have a permanent position currently. I am trying to apply for a permanent academic position, either in teaching or research, but to pay the bills, I'm having to do lots of different things, which I'll talk about in a moment. In terms of where I want to go from here, again, as I've just said, I want to sort of stay within academia in research and teaching. So what does an odd jobs man do? Well, basically, I do several things which are paid, which I'll talk about first, and then I have to do a lot of other things in terms of career enhancement and trying to make myself more attractive as a kind of a early careers academic. So I do some work in the law school where I did my PhD. I help to organise policy seminars for the Centre of Criminological Research. They pay me by the hour to do that. I also do administrative and research support in the law school. I support my supervisor, Maggie Wykes, with a project that she's doing at the moment, which is a comparative study comparing the prosecution of sexual violence in South Africa with the UK. So I do a bit of work on that to help her with that, and I also do just general sort of administrative work for the department. Outside of the university, I also work on a sessional basis for the University of Derby. I do deliver undergraduate teaching to some students on their criminology programme, so they basically just call me in as and when they need me and pay me by the hour to do that. I have a similar setup with Sheffield Hallam University as well. I don't do any teaching for Hallam. I supervise students who are doing undergraduate dissertations in the area of criminology, and again, it's sessional work, so I get paid by the hour to do that. So that's how I basically sort of earn a living at the moment. But I also do several other things, again, just to try to sort of build my profile. And this is one of the things that I'm going to talk about in terms of, you know, some of the issues and the challenges around trying to get into academia as a career. I'm trying to write a book proposal at the moment. I was approached by a publisher. They've asked me if I'd like to write a proposal for them for my PhD, which I'm in the process of doing at the moment, alongside trying to do these other things. I'm also trying to write 2 journal articles as well, which are both co-authored. I'm writing a journal article with somebody which is based on some of the work that I did for my PhD, which looks at traumatic experience in the biographies of violent men and tries to understand, we're trying to sort of explore how trauma can be important in terms of shaping identity and involvement in male violence. The other article that I'm doing something on stag do's. I did some ethnographic work with men. I actually went on a stag do and I did some interviews with men on stag do's, and what we're looking at for that one is we're looking at the kind of political economy. It's laughable, it's you know, sort of sounds a bit funny and stuff, but we're actually looking seriously at the political economy that's growing around all this type of stuff, and some of the quite crude and quite horrible things that people do on stag do's, and what's the kind of the reasoning behind that. And what we're interested in is how capitalism, how advanced capitalism, consumer capitalism is shaping a lot of that and driving people to get involved in that kind of stuff. I'm also trying to explore new research projects. So I'm always, as an academic, as somebody who's particularly as an ethnographer, and as an ethnographer of crime and professional crime and violence, you're always reliant on the relationships that you build with people. I'm quite fortunate that I do have some positive relationships with some people who are involved in that world. So I'm always trying to sort of stay in sort of reasonable contact with them so I can go back to them, because I've got an idea for a project I want to work on once I get into post, so I'm trying to do that. And I'm applying for jobs as well. So that's basically what I do at the moment, which obviously takes up a hell of a lot of my time. But, you know, as I'm going to talk about in a moment, that's the kind of stuff you need to do really at the moment, and I've got to do. In terms of motivation, so why research, why teaching? Like Helen, I did at one time have ambitions to become a police officer. When a couple of the people who actually ended up helping me with my PhD found out I was thinking about becoming a police officer, they weren't too happy about that. But what I realised was that actually, rather than catching criminals, it's much more interesting to study them and do research with them. But generally, I mean, basically, it's because I enjoy it. You know, that's why I do what I do. I really like working with students. I really enjoy teaching. I get a hell of a lot out of it, and really enjoy the sort of talking about criminology, criminological theory, sociology, and sort of giving that information to students. I'm a bit of a nosy Parker, and being a researcher basically gives me a fantastic excuse to actually be nosy and find out about people's lives and their experiences. Basically, my job as a PhD student for the 12 months I was doing the ethnography was, as I've just said, to just hang around with people, and I felt incredibly privileged to hear about some of the things that I did hear about and see some of the things that I did see, and then actually get to write about that. It was a really, really amazing experience. Learning, part of the job of being an academic, you're learning all the time, and I really enjoy the process of learning and then, passing that on, disseminating that, sharing that with other people through teaching, through going to conferences, and also finding out what other people are doing in the areas that I'm working in. It's a really enjoyable and engaging thing to do. So really enjoyment, personal, the personal rewards that you get from it, those are the things that really drive me in terms of why I've chosen this particular career path and want to stay on it. But it's not without challenges, and there are many, and you'll see a little bit of a crossover with what some of the other people have been saying so far. I've got a couple of illustrations to sort of show what I mean. I think you know what I'm probably getting at with this picture. It's competitive. Academia is full of incredibly talented, very intelligent people. And these are the people that you're competing with for jobs. It's really, really hard. And as a couple of other people have said already, you need some strings to your bow. Just relying on a degree, that's not enough, unfortunately. You need to have the volunteer work. You need to do other things which show you how you're a much more sort of rounded and capable person. And I'll talk about that a little bit more as well. I often feel a little bit like this guy up here, particularly when I was doing my PhD. I was lucky enough to get a scholarship, and it was quite a nice scholarship in terms of the amount of money that I got. But, I'm not earning big bucks. I'm never going to earn big bucks. So, it's basically something I had to put up with at times, not having enough money to go out. My friends would be going on holiday and doing all these kinds of things, and PhD student, you sometimes have to put up with, not having too much money. And lastly, you often feel a bit like this chap as well. I often felt a bit like this chap, often working quite late at night, feeling stressed, feeling tired. Academia, sometimes you have to work long days, sometimes you have to work weekends, this evenings. This is the reality of it. And you have to work incredibly hard if you're going to get a PhD. And also when I was working at NCB as well, being a researcher, etc., that sometimes involved on social hours, that sort of thing. So again, be prepared for all of that sort of stuff. These are the kinds of some of the challenges that come with it. And now, currently, at the moment, I'm doing all that stuff that I've talked about, and on top of that, I'm having to try to sort of write articles, get a book contract, do all this other stuff, which I need to try and get a permanent job. So, just in terms of what to do next, a couple of things that I would suggest if you are interested in maybe going on to do a PhD, or just interested in going into research in general, whether that be in the private sector or the charitable or third sector. You're not going to be able to do it without doing postgraduate study. You're going to have to look at doing a master's in some form of social research or an area of research that interests yourself. If you want to kind of go on to that, you do need that really. And again, if you're going to do a PhD, that inevitably involves more study. Again, as everybody else has been, so I was just saying, like everybody else has been stressing to you, cannot stress enough how important voluntary and extracurricular work is. Just as a kind of an anecdote, the job that I got at National Children's Bureau, once I got into post, I said to my manager, so why did you pick me? Why did you give me the job? Because there was about 100 people that applied for that job and I got it. And I said, well, why did you give it to me? And they said, the reason we gave it to you is because you had got first-hand experience of working with children and young people. That pushed you over the edge, and particularly with a vulnerable group of young people in the justice system. So that voluntary work that I did for a year or so with Rodney Defending Services was really, really valuable to me. And again, if you can get it within, if you are thinking about research as a career, if you can get some kind of voluntary work that's aligned to your research interest, that is going to be really helpful for you. It's helpful in terms of getting your contacts, because again, if you want to do research, you need your contacts to get your access, etc. So if it is youth justice you're interested in, look at that route. If it's disability, if it's community, sports, whatever it is, look for some kind of a voluntary program or something, some area of work you can do that would really help you with that and give you the skills, etc., that will be useful. Another one, stay connected, basically. Meritocracy, we like to think that it's a nice thing and it's an idea that works, but I think as sociologists we all know that it's a load of rubbish, basically. And actually, unfortunately, the old adage of it's not what you know, it's who you know, it does sometimes ring true very much. And so what I'm saying is, basically, if you are interested in going into research or to a PhD, stay in touch with your professors. stay in touch with your lecturers and your tutors, etc. These are the people who've got their finger on the pulse. They know what funding's coming up, they know what opportunities are coming up, so stay in touch with them, and use them as much as you can. If this is something that you want to get involved in, these are the people that are going to really help you. They're also the people that are going to write you the really good references that you need as well. And lastly, just where to look, really, if you are interested. There are obviously lots of places that you can look, but these two websites in particular are really helpful. The Guardian, their jobs section, and jobs.ac.uk are really good places to look for academic posts, but also for third sector charitable organisations, private sector that are advertising research type posts will use these particular websites as well. So I'd suggest looking there. And that's it. And if anyone's got questions, I'll happily answer them.